car.
It's a car you just gotta drive a bit to get used to. I'm gonna try not to embarrass myself.
Oh, you're gonna do that. I embarrass myself driving this thing every time I get in it. Either I'll chirp tire.
Am I back in first?
Yep.
Oops. All right. We'll figure it out. I'll figure it out. So I am back here today with Matt in his 73 Sonnet. This time driving it. Now, I did a video on this before and we went over all the details of it, and I left you guys on a cliffhanger saying that I would be back to drive it. So here we are, now we're driving it, and it's definitely a different experience to say the least. So you have an aftermarket clutch on this.
Yes, it's the original style was a spring, a coil spring pressure plate. And this has a upgraded diaphragm style of like a modern car.
I love that sound. It's such a unique sound. This has the 1.7 V4 motor in it, right?
Correct. Well, this started life as a 1.7. It's now close to a 1.8 liter.
Okay.
With larger pistons in it. Really the only difference in the motor besides the bigger valves and a hotter camshaft. No headwork was done to couple all this together, so the improvements are minimal at best. A note to all Sonnet owners out there, this is what you're hearing when you put 185 series tires on the back. The constant rubbing of the fender against the tire with two people in the car.
Is it just the weight? The suspension is sagging a bit?
Yeah, these, I've got conies in the back, so they don't like to let the spring return as fast, so I do have them dialed up a bit too to give me a little bit better, harder feel in the rear. But yeah, so it's just something that you shouldn't do unless you have fenders that can accommodate.
So one thing I want to touch on is the brakes. It takes a lot of, you gotta really get on the pedal to slow this thing down.
Correct, and that's because they're non-vacuum boosted. So you have basically all of your foot pressure is what's developing the brake pressure. It can, sometimes, you know, you got drums in the rear and very small non-vented discs in the front. So that can feel a bit hard sometimes. Yeah, and especially when you're used to a more modern car like your Miata, most especially. The good thing about these brakes is that they're kind of difficult to lock up.
Okay.
With so much tire, with the 185 series tires on there, there is a lot of mechanical grip among the wheel. So you can, you know, basically treat them like an anti-lock, because they really won't lock unless you're in a panic stop situation and you really muscle it. But you just apply them harder to the amount of force that you want, and it's you know, it's one of those things again that driving an older car, all these all of my old friends out there, you know, Bradley Burns, Tom Donnie, all you guys, you know who you are, they're going to be like, oh, well, that's the way it always has been, and that's the way it was, and that's just the characteristic of an old car. And that is true. You won't find much better braking if you owned anything different, like say a Mark I Golf or a comparable MG or a Triumph of the same decade.
So I want to talk about, you know, this was Saab's sports car per se. So does it handle, you know, like a sports car? Is it actually a sports car? And you know, as we're taking these tight turns so far, you know, outside the brakes, which scare me to death if I need to slow down quickly, which is why I'm not going too fast, the car, I mean, it sticks to the ground very well. I mean, I'm not taking these turns incredibly fast, but you know, it's holding its own through here.
And you know, your Miata is probably
right. It's a great benchmark. That's what I was going to talk about. Gas station. Probably 2 gallons since I picked you up. might be.
Actually, it will ruin you because the Miata is probably one of the best handling cars on the planet.
Right.
And so if you're comparing it to a Miata and you think that it is on par with a Miata, that's incredibly flattering. There is nothing I'd rather have in an autocross than a Miata. So to compare the handling characteristics of low speed drivability and things like that to that car is quite impressive, being as though it has a 20-year head start in technology.
And this is also front wheel drive as well, which does not help you when you're trying to take a turn quickly.
A lot of the guys that drove these fast, of course, they steer with the rear. So if you stiffen up the rear end enough, you can kind of get it to drift around and then just throttle through for taking, you know, a particular line.
Right. Your three pedals are very close together. Let me just also put that in there. I mean, I'm kind of comparing a lot of this to my Miata, which I think is a fair comparison in a way, considering, you know, this is also a sports car, but the pedals, like on the other manual Saabs that my family has, they're a lot closer together than in a Miata. I mean, the Miata, you don't even really have a dead pedal. You've got barely enough space to get your foot between the clutch and the left side of the car, but the dead pedal here is, you can almost put both your feet there. You said you have conies on here, or you have different suspension? Is that all around? Or
yeah, I have the, and they're a little old and weathered, so they're not going to be as good as a new set by any stretch. But yeah, I have conies front and rear, and then a slightly stiffer spring that was installed by Saab Classic Racing. Not installed by, purchased from. So it's a slight improvement. It's got no bushings, which it really should get. You know, the PowerFlex bushings. By the way, thank you PowerFlex for making all of our bushings.
It is very on and off with the throttle, like you said.
And first gear is largely useless unless if you're already rolling at all. Like I can start off in second gear with no problems, like a normal car even. And the Europeans were really good about gearing. They could make a slow car seem fast just because they knew how to gear it properly. And you know, a 911 is a perfect example of that, because they weren't really, you know, heavily powered, but they always performed really well because they had proper gearing and good suspensions.
Right, and there's no getting around that this, you know, especially by today's standards, it's not a fast car, but it doesn't feel like a complete slouch, you know?
Yeah. And this one has some power adders. The carburetor being one of them. The carburetor, the pistons, the cam, things like that. But once again, without the cylinder head being opened up, the gains were kind of negated because of that.
So you mentioned Saab Classics Racing. So do they sell a lot of aftermarket parts for older Saabs? Are they kind of like the map tune of classic Saabs in a way, or?
Yeah, in a way. We have several sources. Saab Classic Racing. Is an outfit in Sweden that some Saab enthusiasts started, and they cater a lot to the V4 and two-stroke cars primarily. They don't really get into the 99s or 900 era. They offer things for us like the bigger pistons that we get for the V4. They have camshafts and copper head gaskets, and they're kind of a source. They come across some used sport and rally stuff sometimes.
Do you know anyone that like would autocross or race a Sonett or any other classic Saabs? Is there anyone out there crazy enough to do something like that? I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. There's quite a strong following in the vintage race courses. The Targa Newfoundland always has a strong showing. Autocrossing, there is several gentlemen that I'm friends with on Facebook that have very competitive cars, as well as vintage and historic HSR, Vara, and that. So the community, because Saab is traditionally a competitive rally car, the following is quite large.
So I want to thank you so much for bringing out the Sonett to let me drive. I mean, this is an incredible experience. Not many people have, you know, been able to say that they've driven one of these, especially on a nice mountain road like this, and really, you know, kind of tested it out. So you have a bunch of other classic Saabs that I'm sure, you know, one day we'll do videos on if you're more than willing to. So. Yep. Thank you so much for bringing the car out. If you guys did enjoy this video, make sure to give it a big thumbs up, and I'll see you all next time.